Hello everybody. So I have here the Sword of Godric Gryffindor, which appears in the Harry Potter movies. First appears in the end of Chamber of Secrets, where Harry Potter grabs it out of the sorting hat and stabs the basilisk. And then it also appears in the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, I think. This is the design that Warner Brothers made. And Godric Gryffindor, in the lore behind him, he's from the 10th century, and that's the sword he used then. And it's bugged me for a very long time. I mean, when these movies came out, so Chamber of Secrets Part 1, I was really young, so I wouldn't know any better, to be honest, about the sword and what it should really look like. Even when Deathly Hallows came out, Part 2, in Part 1 and 2, I may have had some thinking of that this sword is poorly designed or should look different, but I can't really remember because it was quite some time ago. And after that, it started. I watch these movies every year pretty much during the winter, and now I know more about sword construction design, and its history, how they developed over time, and geographical locations and the changes between that as well. And when it comes to like commerce and exchange of cultures and culture design, all that kind of stuff, when that happens, I've learned a little bit more over time. And the Warner Brothers sword, to be honest, is quite poorly designed. Matt Easton of Scholar Gladiator has done a video on this, but I wanted to get my opinions and my takes from someone who is an artist, and a historical artist who knows quite a lot of historical artifacts and the a lot of martial arts and arms and armor. So I'm going to show you what I have done, and I'm going to talk to you through the difference between what I have done and the research, a little bit on the research on the side that I've done, just to sort of create a more accurate depiction of what the Sword of Godric Gryffindor probably would have looked like if Warner Brothers basically got someone who knew a bit more. Okay, here we go. The new design. Now we have here quite a different design, but I've used a lot of elements from the original. A lot of motifs from the grip and the handle, crossguard, the use of gems, which, to be honest, is not really used much in the 10th century. But I'm willing to make an exception there, because gems in general have been put on all kinds of items in history anyway, so I'm willing to make a nice exception for that. Also makes the sword look a little bit more blingy. I'm going to zoom in here just briefly, just on the grips. I'm going to talk about the hilt construction, the hilt. So vastly different here. We have, on my new one, we've got a curved cross guard, or guard. It's not really a proper guard as you would think in from about the 13th century onwards, 14th, 12th to 13th century, where the quillons start to extend out a little further. It's quite short in the 10th century. Yeah, we are sticking to 10th century England. That is where the core design of this sword comes from, because Godric Gryffindor is from England. So we also have here quite a large pommel, and I'm sticking to the silhouette design of what you get in history, and I shall show you that later. This little area here, I'm not actually sure on what the decoration of the grip, what it actually is. I couldn't quite depict that, so I replaced that here with a griffin, because it's one of the major symbols of his house, Gryffindor. Put a griffin on the grip. And then on the pommel here, on this larger lobe area of the pommel, I've put in a lion's face, just because that coincides with the symbology of and heraldry items and of Godric Gryffindor. So gems are added. I've also made them a little bit more shiny. I think the one here that I've taken an image from is basically a reproduction. It's not the original from the movies. I think the one in the movie is probably a little bit more elaborate. I've also added here on the new design lots of gold plating or gold inlay wirework, and it's different copper alloys as well. So around this large gem here, it's more copper alloy rather than gold. Also, if we go further up on the blades, we've both got Godric Gryffindor inlaid into the sword. In the original one, we've got probably laser cut or laser etched into the sword. It may be acid etched, but I reckon it was laser done. In my case, I have made gold inlay, and this is going according to what some quite a few swords in the 10th century actually had. In the fuller would be a name or the name of the guy who made it, or the company. Well, it wouldn't be, companies didn't really exist that much then, but Ulfbert was a famous the Ulfbert swords were quite famous in the day because the name was inlaid into the fuller, and I've got some images here. We have here inlaid Ulfbert. These are more Scandinavian in design, the actual sword constructions. Similar period, but yeah, so that was very much a common thing to have, is this very expensive gold inlay and very finely crafted. It's very difficult to actually produce that type of gold inlay into the sword. There's so many mistakes you could make. It's quite well crafted. The hilt construction in itself is just a whole different kind of art process altogether. The amount of design behind these Scandinavian swords is just mind-boggling. And then, if you go back to like the 6th, 7th century, a whole nother kind of art style, sort of Vendel period swords. But that's a whole different topic. We're talking about 10th century England, not 6th century Scandinavia, 7th century Scandinavia. So just like in the original, I've got Godric Gryffindor inlaid in, but the typography is, I'm zooming in quite far here, but the typography I'm coinciding into some of the more typography of the day, and what could have been inlaid. But for film purposes, it does quite clearly say Godric Gryffindor here, and I remember there being a close-up shot of that, and you can clearly read that. I reckon here it's a little harder to read. Maybe there'll be different design choices, but a gold inlay on a silver, sort of silver, well-polished sword would be quite easy to read, especially if it's upright. The lettering here, instead of going down to the blade, I've done it just upright here, which most historical swords have their lettering like that. So that's what we've got. The blade type itself, I mean, this, I don't know who designed the Warner Brothers sword itself, but it screams of Victorian replica or dress sword replica type thing. The type of blade that's used, it's very basic in design. We've got a flat section on the blade here, and then it just tapers off into a sort of like a wedge edge. Whereas I would, if this was to be made, I'd go for the typical sort of spatulated tip, quite thick cutting type blade with a fuller down the central part of the blade. And I would, in this case, instead of being pattern welded, I would make it Wootz steel, which is something that the Ulfbert swords were. Wootz coming from Asia, and is a whole different type of process in creating the steel. It's very fine, very hard to produce as well, using very particular metals, alloys to create the Wootz pattern. And Godric Gryffindor being quite a special person, quite high end, quite high status, I reckon he could have access to something like this. Okay, so where did I get the designs from? Where are these inspired from? Okay, so let's get rid of these swords here. Now we're going to just look at some English existing swords from Godric's time. These are finds that, luckily, we've got a fair few that actually exist today, that are solely English and from the 10th century, pretty much. So you can see here these curved guards, curved pommel, end of the pommel, and curved guards. This is something that you can see on a lot of English swords, probably made in England, and these are high status objects, quite high status. You're talking about way up in the sort of social hierarchy. So we, on the left here, you got all this decoration. It's very highly decorated. And the grip is decorated. Gillingwest sword. Some of these are from the British Museum. Some of them are from other museums and things like that. So there's a 9th/10th century sword. I read it on one article that it was 9th century, and then on the museum page where it displays that says it's from the 10th century. So it's like, well, it's from that, around that time anyway. Moving along, again we've got that curved guard. We've got this curved pommel cap here. It's almost like the construction consists of this T shape here, or I shape, and then it's got a pommel cap here. And then the grip would have been quite elaborate as well, with these ribs here. It's from Sheffield. Abingdon sword, which is in Berkshire. Same sort of design, curving, and then lots of motifs, patterns, very Anglo-Saxon type here. Moving along, it's a little bit more plainer, but I reckon that it would have had some inlay or some other decoration. It's just showing its age here. Hasn't quite survived so well, but again, it's got the same curved shapes. Whitham sword, again, curved guard, curved shapes here, and we've got a very sort of uniform, very similar type of design in the hilt construction. And of course there are slight differences, in this Gillingwest sword, quite a pointy end on this central lobe here, and then some others are a little flatter, and it does change a little bit. No sword is exactly the same, but there is overall certainly a way they produced and style in the 10th century of England, and you would have had many cultures from the Nordic areas, from Scandinavia, that would have an impact on this. Frankish territories would have a little bit of an impact as well. So yeah, moving on, these are some other swords I just wanted to talk about. So this one is from Ireland, and it's missing its end pommel cap here. That's not exactly how it looked like. It would have had one of these end pommel caps, just to finish off the silhouette. But it's just to point out that there would have been, and it's quite common, or well, it's not super common, but it certainly happened, is this inlay in the sword with lettering. This one is 9th, 10th century. Notice how these sort of eye shapes here are straighter, not curved as you see in the English style. Earl of Pembroke's tomb, so Pembroke, I think that's Wales. Similar sort of end pommel cap, but again it's quite quite straight eye shape here. And then Enfield, straight, but that's English. So there would have been a bit of sort of like a cultural blend, or not interference, but certainly impact on designs here. So this is from the Met Museum. It says probably Scandinavian on the website, but it's 10th century. And again, you see here this straight guard, and then the end pommel cap being quite semicircular with the eye shape here, with the grip and the guard and the pommel cap. So overall, there is a theme, especially with the English style, with these curved guards, and I wanted to repeat that with this style. Just wanted to say that the lore behind the sword is also that it's goblin made, so it's not going to be exactly looking like it's completely human made. So the goblin, whatever culture they have, is going to have some sort of impact onto it, so it's not going to look exactly standard of what you would find in from a human sword, but it's a goblin made sword for Godric, which is quite interesting. But overall, I had a bit of fun making this. I've always wanted to do this because it's bugged me for ages, and I wanted to make a video on it and sort of create a new design for Godric's sword. But please let me know what your thoughts are, if I have made any mistakes, or if you have any adjustments or feelings or anything like that. You might feel that, nostalgically you'd rather have the original because that's where the original design, whereas maybe if there's going to be a new Harry Potter in the future, which I think there's meant to be a TV show at some point about it, not too excited about that. But what would they do? Would they actually think, oh, this sword's from the 10th century, maybe we should actually look at some 10th century swords from England and see what they look like, and what the goblin impact would be on the sort of goblin culture and its impact on the design of the sword, that kind of stuff. So anyway, I shall stop rambling on. I've gone on for way too long as it is, but please let me know, and I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know on your thoughts. Cheers folks.